They put my house up for sale. Without asking, without telling me, without owning it. I'm at a construction site when my neighbor Dolores texts me a photo that makes my blood freeze. Strangers in business suits measuring my grandfather's cabin deck, while a realtor in designer heels stands in my driveway pointing at the property like she's already counting her commission. The acrid smell of spilled coffee fills my truck cab as my hands shake, staring at these vultures circling my family's sanctuary. I can almost taste the metallic rage coating my tongue as HOA President Veronica Ashworth's smug voicemail plays. Just exploring community improvement options, Garrett, you understand? No, Veronica, I don't understand how you think you can sell what isn't yours. But here's what I do understand: how to fight back. What would you do if strangers were touring your property like they already owned it? And where are you watching from? Please tell me this kind of HOA insanity happens everywhere, not just here. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name's Garrett, and that cabin they're trying to steal? It's been in my family for 43 years. My grandfather Fletcher bought those 2 acres in 1981 with his disability check from the Korean War. The man came home with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares that never quit, but he found peace by that little lake. Built every inch of that cabin with his own weathered hands, cutting each board, driving every nail, installing plumbing that still works better than most new houses. "This is our forever home, Garrett," he'd tell me every summer when I'd help him stain the deck. The sweet scent of pine sap would stick to our fingers for days. Nobody can take what you build with your own sweat. Fletcher died 3 years ago, left me the cabin and every memory soaked into those hand-hewn walls. It's where my 16-year-old daughter Mackenzie escapes when her mom and I aren't getting along, which is most of the time since the divorce. It's where I go every weekend to remember what quiet sounds like after 60-hour construction weeks filled with jackhammers and yelling foremen. That property predates the HOA by 30 years. Grandpa's deed shows clear ownership long before these suburban warriors moved in and decided everyone needed matching mailboxes. Enter Veronica Ashworth, HOA president and professional pain in everyone's ass. She moved here from California 2 years ago, drives a white BMW that she washes twice a week, and thinks our quaint little community needs improvement. Translation: she wants to price out anyone who doesn't drive a luxury car. Veronica's got perfectly manicured nails that she uses to point at violations, and she speaks in legalese to intimidate people who didn't go to law school. I've watched her measure neighbors' grass with an actual ruler. I'm not kidding, a 12-inch wooden ruler like we're all in 3rd grade. Her first shot across my bow came 6 months ago, a citation for my grandfather's workshop being a non-conforming rustic structure. Apparently, hand-built craftsmanship doesn't meet her aesthetic standards. She demanded $15,000 in architectural compliance fees, or complete reconstruction to match her vision of suburban paradise. When I told her what she could do with her compliance fees, in language my grandfather would have appreciated, she escalated to today's real estate circus. The realtor touring my property, Veronica's college sorority sister from USC. The marketing materials describe my family sanctuary as a prime development opportunity with tear-down potential for modern lake access amenities. These vultures were literally discussing demolishing my grandfather's workshop to build a yoga studio. Here's the thing that makes my jaw clench. They have zero legal standing. This is pure intimidation, designed to pressure me into selling cheap so Veronica can flip it to developers for 10 times what I'd get. But it's not just about money. That cabin represents the last solid connection to my grandfather's memory. It's where Mackenzie feels safe when the world gets too loud. It's my weekend escape from job sites where everything is rushed and nothing is built to last. The rough texture of those hand-hewn porch railings tells the story of a man who built things right the first time. The sound of loons calling across the water every evening, that's the piece Fletcher fought a war to protect. The scent of coffee brewing in his old percolator still fills the kitchen every Saturday morning. Now Veronica wants to erase all of that for what? Property values? Neighborhood uniformity? Other neighbors are watching, wondering if they're next on her hit list. Old Mrs. Patterson got a violation for her rose garden being too colorful. The Hendricks family faces daily fines for parking their work truck in their own driveway. The community is holding its breath, waiting to see if regular folks can still live in the places they've called home for decades, or if money and legal threats always win. Well, Veronica just picked the wrong family to mess with. My grandfather didn't survive frozen foxholes in Korea so some HOA tyrant could steal his legacy. Time to show her what Fletcher's grandson learned about fighting back. Veronica's next move came exactly 1 week after the Realtor incident. A formal letter on fake legal letterhead that would have made a real attorney wet themselves laughing. Notice of abandoned property statute violation, it screamed in bold letters. According to Veronica's creative interpretation of property law, my weekend-only use of the cabin constituted abandonment under Municipal Code 847.3b. She was threatening daily $500 fines starting in 30 days unless I either moved there full-time or surrendered the deed for community benefit. The smell of fresh toner from her expensive printer couldn't mask the stench of complete bullshit. She'd copied the letter to County Commissioner Bradley Walsh, her tennis partner at the country club. The message was clear: I'm connected, you're not, so roll over and play dead. But here's what Veronica didn't know about construction workers. We solve problems for a living. When a foundation cracks, we don't panic. We dig deeper to find the real problem. I spent my lunch break at the county clerk's office, a musty basement that smells like decades of bureaucratic coffee stains and broken dreams. The clerk, Beverly, had seen every property scam in the book. She pulled out deed records going back to when this area was nothing but cornfields and fishing spots. Your grandfather was smart, Beverly said, her weathered fingers tracing the original survey lines. Look at this. My heart started pounding as she showed me Fletcher's 1981 survey. Our property line extended 50 feet further north than anyone realized, including Veronica. That fancy HOA community mailbox cluster she was so proud of, sitting smack in the middle of my grandfather's land. Even better, the deed included a clause I'd never noticed before. Grandfathered property rights in perpetuity with all municipal exemptions maintained. In lawyer speak for, this land belongs to the Fletcher family forever, and no HOA that didn't exist when we bought it can change that. I'd seen contractors get saved by old building permits they thought they'd lost. Same principle applies to property deeds. Always check 3 places for documentation before accepting someone's word that you're screwed. But the real bombshell came from my neighbor Dolores that evening. She knocked on my door with homemade oatmeal cookies and information that made my jaw drop. That Ashworth woman offered me $500, Dolores whispered, glancing around like we were planning a bank heist. Wanted me to take pictures of your violations, your truck, your boat, anything she could use to build a case. She handed me a handwritten list that made my blood boil. The Morrison family, forced to sell after months of harassment about their non-conforming fence. The Patterson cottage, currently under attack for having too many garden gnomes. The Hendricks clan, facing daily fines for parking their work truck in their own damn driveway. She's not just coming after you, Garrett, Dolores said, the crunch of autumn leaves under our feet as we walked my property line. She wants to clear out anyone who doesn't drive a BMW. Then Dolores dropped the real bomb. I've been documenting everything she's been doing. Photos, recordings, copies of her harassment letters to other families. I was a high school principal for 30 years. I know a bully when I see one. This sweet 70-year-old teacher had been running a one-woman intelligence operation against Veronica for months. She had evidence of systematic harassment, discriminatory targeting, and what looked suspiciously like a coordinated plan to force property sales. But here's the part that'll make you smile, Dolores grinned. I did some research of my own. Your HOA president isn't quite what she seems. Veronica Ashworth, the woman terrorizing our neighborhood with legal threats, her California law license had been suspended for mishandling client trust accounts. Her perfect suburban lifestyle, built on maxed-out credit cards and a mortgage she was 3 months behind on. She wasn't some powerful legal eagle. She was a desperate fraud using intimidation tactics because she had nothing else left. That night, I installed security cameras at every corner of my property. Motion-activated, night vision, professional grade, the kind we use on construction sites to catch equipment thieves. If Veronica wanted to play surveillance games, I'd play them with better equipment. I also called Tom Martinez, a local attorney who specialized in property rights and had a particular hatred for HOA bullies. Bring me everything, he said after I explained the situation. These fake legal letters, the survey documents, your neighbor's evidence file. This woman just picked a fight with the wrong family. My construction crew offered backup. Blue-collar solidarity runs deep when suburban bullies attack one of your own. Even Mackenzie got involved, helping me organize all the documents while asking innocent questions like, "Dad, is it illegal to lie in official letters?" Smart kid. She already understood we weren't just fighting for our cabin. We were fighting for everyone Veronica had targeted. The sweet scent of pine needles filled the evening air as I sat on Grandpa's porch, reviewing our evidence. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole mess started. Confidence. Veronica thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to discover that construction workers are pretty damn good at chess, too. 2 weeks after my courthouse discovery, Veronica played her next card, and this time she brought reinforcements. I was replacing rotted deck boards on the cabin when a white county truck pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Harold Wessler, code enforcement officer, clipboard in hand, and a look on his face like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him emerged Veronica, wearing her power suit like armor and that smug smile that made my teeth itch. "Mr. Fletcher," Harold began, clearly reading from prepared notes, "we've received complaints about unpermitted structures on this property. Specifically, that workshop appears to violate current building codes and may require immediate remediation." The workshop. My grandfather's pride and joy, built with his own hands in 1983. Solid as a rock, better constructed than half the McMansions going up around here. "What kind of remediation?" I asked, though I already knew this was another shakedown. Veronica stepped forward like she'd been waiting for this moment. $25,000 in permits and code compliance updates or demolition within 30 days. The structure simply doesn't meet current safety standards. The acrid smell of Harold's cigarettes mixed with Veronica's expensive perfume created a nauseating cloud in the crisp morning air. I could taste the metallic edge of anger building in my throat again. But here's the thing about working construction for 15 years. You learn to keep your cool when people try to screw you with fake emergencies. Instead of exploding, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Harold," I said calmly, "can you show me exactly which codes this 40-year-old building violates?" Harold shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Veronica. "Well, there's no permit on file with current systems. Because the county lost records during the computer transition in 2019, I replied, "but I bet the original contractor still has copies." Veronica's smile faltered just slightly. She hadn't expected me to do homework. That afternoon, I called every contractor who'd worked this area in the early 80s. The third call hit gold. Jimmy Kowalski, now 74 and retired, but still sharp as a tack. "Fletcher cabin? Hell yes, I remember that job," Jimmy laughed. "Your granddad was a perfectionist. Made me redo the foundation twice because one corner was off by half an inch. That workshop was built to withstand a hurricane." Jimmy still had his project files from 1983, including the original building permit, inspection reports, and final approval signatures. Everything Veronica claimed didn't exist, sitting in a dusty filing cabinet in Jimmy's basement. Sometimes the best defense against bureaucratic bullies is better paperwork than they have, and old contractors never throw anything away. But the real eye-opener came when Harold called me that evening, voice hushed like he was worried about being overheard. "Garrett, I need to tell you something off the record," he said. "Those violations I cited today, they're questionable at best. Mrs. Ashworth has been pressuring me to find problems with certain properties." Harold was up for re-election next year. Veronica had been making campaign donations and hosting fundraisers, but also making it clear that her support came with expectations. "I can't say this officially," Harold continued, "but if you file a formal complaint about harassment, I'll back you up. This isn't how code enforcement should work." The next morning brought my favorite kind of surprise: security camera footage of Veronica's midnight gardening project. At 12:47 a.m., clear as daylight on infrared video, Veronica crept onto my property carrying a bag of decorative flower pots. I watched her carefully place them along what she thought was the property line, then use a measuring tape to mark their exact positions. Her plan was transparent: place unauthorized decorations on my land, photograph them the next day as evidence of property line encroachment, then use that as grounds for another harassment campaign. But my grandfather's survey put those flower pots 15 feet inside my boundaries. Veronica wasn't just trespassing, she was planting false evidence. The smooth plastic of the camera housing felt cold under my fingers as I downloaded the footage. The bitter taste of early morning coffee couldn't wash away my grin as I watched Veronica literally bury herself deeper in legal trouble. I forwarded the video to Tom Martinez, who nearly choked on his morning coffee laughing. She's now committed criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to file false reports, he said. This woman is building our case for us. Jimmy Kowalski delivered the original permits that afternoon, along with photos of the workshop construction and a sworn affidavit about the building's compliance with all 1983 codes. Dolores provided additional intelligence. Veronica had tried to pressure Roscoe at the hardware store to refuse service to problem neighbors, meaning anyone who opposed her agenda. She's getting desperate, Dolores observed, watching from her kitchen window as Veronica drove slowly past my cabin for the third time that day. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. Harold officially withdrew the violation notice that Friday, citing incomplete information and need for further review. Veronica's power play had backfired spectacularly. Instead of intimidating me into compliance, she'd created a paper trail of harassment and given me criminal evidence of trespassing. But I could feel her desperation growing, and desperate people are dangerous. The real war was just beginning. 3 days after Harold withdrew the bogus violation, Veronica went nuclear. A process server knocked on my door at 6:30 a.m., clipboard thick with legal documents that made my morning coffee taste like ash. Veronica Ashworth versus Garrett Fletcher, a lawsuit claiming my property devalued the entire neighborhood by $2 million collectively. The accusations were breathtaking in their creativity. According to her complaint, I was creating a hostile environment through intimidation tactics and deliberate property neglect designed to harm community standards. She was seeking a temporary restraining order to prevent me from accessing my own land while the court sorted out her claims. Her attorney was Marcus Webb from Steinberg, Webb & Associates, the kind of law firm that charges $500 an hour to intimidate working-class people into submission. Their letterhead alone probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. But desperation makes people sloppy, and Veronica had just made a massive miscalculation. I called Tom Martinez immediately. "Bring everything to my office today," he said after I read him the complaint. "And I mean everything: deeds, surveys, camera footage, financial records. This woman just opened the door for us to countersue." While I was gathering documents, my buddy Rick from the construction crew was doing some digging of his own. Rick's cousin worked for a private investigation firm, and family favors run deep in blue-collar circles. "Your HOA queen is in serious financial trouble," Rick reported that afternoon. "Bankruptcy filing shows she owes $180,000 in credit card debt, plus her mortgage is in default. She's 3 months from losing everything." The pieces started clicking together like a well-built frame. Veronica wasn't just power-hungry, she was financially desperate. This whole campaign against longtime residents wasn't about community improvement, it was about survival. Rick's cousin had uncovered something even more interesting. A development company called Lakeshore Properties had been quietly buying up distressed properties around the lake. 3 foreclosures in the past year, all purchased by shell companies that traced back to Lakeshore. "Here's the kicker," Rick continued. "Lakeshore specializes in what they call community optimization. They move into established neighborhoods, partner with HOAs to harass longtime residents, then swoop in to buy properties cheap when people can't afford the legal fights." I remembered something my grandfather used to say about foundation problems. When you see one crack, there are always more hiding underneath. You've got to dig deeper to find them all. That evening, I was reviewing documents in my kitchen when Tom called with news that made me nearly choke on my sandwich. "Garrett, you're not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "I've been researching your HOA's incorporation status, and we've got a problem, a big problem for them." He'd discovered that the Willowbrook Homeowners Association was never properly incorporated under state law. The original filing from 2019 was rejected by the Secretary of State for incomplete paperwork and missing signatures. Veronica never corrected the deficiencies. Every citation she'd issued, every fine she'd collected, every enforcement action she'd taken over the past 3 years, all of it was legally meaningless. An unincorporated HOA has no more legal authority than a book club. "She's been collecting fees and issuing penalties with zero legal standing," Tom explained. "That's not overzealous enforcement, that's fraud." The implications hit me like a load of concrete blocks falling off a truck. 47 families had been paying illegal fees averaging $3,200 each. Veronica had collected nearly $500,000 over 3 years with no legal right to do so. Some elderly residents, like the Kowalski family, had borrowed against their homes to pay her fabricated fines. The stress had literally made people sick. Mrs. Patterson developed anxiety attacks after months of harassment about her rose garden. But here's what sealed Veronica's fate. Tom found records showing she'd used the HOA credit card for personal expenses. Spa treatments, vacation rentals, car payments, all funded with money stolen from neighbors who thought they were paying legitimate community fees. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore," Tom said. "We're talking criminal charges. Wire fraud, racketeering, embezzlement, the works." The smooth surface of my grandfather's kitchen table felt solid under my palms as the full scope of Veronica's crimes became clear. She hadn't just targeted my family. She'd been systematically robbing the entire community for years. That night, I sat on the cabin porch listening to loons call across the dark water, their voices echoing like ghosts of better times. The crisp October air carried the scent of wood smoke from someone's fireplace, mixing with the earthy smell of fallen leaves. My grandfather always said that bullies count on good people staying quiet and scared, but sometimes a bully picks on the wrong person at exactly the right moment when all their lies are about to collapse anyway. Veronica thought she was fighting one stubborn construction worker over a piece of lakefront property. She was actually fighting an entire community that was about to discover they'd been robbed blind by their trusted leader. The real battle was about to begin. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Tom Martinez called, his voice tight with the kind of excitement lawyers get when they find the smoking gun. "Garrett, you need to sit down for this," he said. "My paralegal just finished the deep dive into your HOA's financial records, and what we found is going to blow this case wide open. I was installing new gutters on a client's house, but I climbed down the ladder and found a quiet spot behind my truck. The metallic taste of anticipation filled my mouth as I waited for Tom to drop the bomb. Your HOA collected $430,000 from residents over 3 years," he began. "But here's the kicker. Only $180,000 remains in the account. $250,000 is missing." The numbers hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. That wasn't just skimming or poor bookkeeping. That was systematic theft on a massive scale. "Where did it go?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Veronica's personal accounts show suspicious deposits matching HOA withdrawal dates exactly," Tom continued. "Wire transfers, cashier's checks, even direct deposits disguised as consulting fees. She's been looting the community fund like her personal piggy bank." But the financial fraud was just the beginning. Tom's investigation had uncovered the real conspiracy behind Veronica's harassment campaign. "Remember that development company your friend Rick mentioned? Lakeshore Properties paid Veronica $50,000 last month as a community liaison fee," Tom said. "We've got bank records showing the payment came 2 days after she ramped up enforcement actions against you and 3 other lakefront property owners." The pieces of Veronica's scheme crystallized with sickening clarity. Lakeshore specialized in what they called community optimization, partnering with corrupt HOA boards to systematically harass longtime residents until they sold their properties cheap. Veronica would target families who couldn't afford prolonged legal battles, then Lakeshire would swoop in with lowball offers on distressed properties. "They've done this in 3 other counties," Tom explained. "Same pattern every time. Corrupt HOA official creates fake violations, families get overwhelmed by legal costs, properties get sold for pennies on the dollar, then Lakeshire flips them for massive profits." My grandfather's cabin was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Lakeshire wanted 3 specific lakefront properties for a luxury resort development. The projected profit? $15 million once they controlled enough contiguous shoreline. Veronica's promised cut was $500,000, enough to pay off her debts and disappear before anyone realized what happened. "But here's where she got too greedy," Tom said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "She's been filing fake incorporation documents with the court system, claiming legal authority she never had. Every legal filing she's made compounds the fraud charges." The scope of Veronica's criminal enterprise was staggering. 47 families had been systematically robbed over 3 years. Elderly residents like Fletcher's neighbor Ed Kowalski had borrowed against their home equity to pay fabricated fines. The stress had literally hospitalized 2 residents with heart problems. Some families had already cracked under the pressure. The Morrison cottage that sold last year for half its market value? The buyers were a Lakeshore shell company. The sellers never knew they were being manipulated into financial distress by their own HOA president. "This isn't about your cabin anymore, Garrett," Tom said quietly. "This is about protecting an entire community from organized crime disguised as civic authority." The bitter October wind whipped through the construction site as Tom explained the next steps. Criminal referrals to the district attorney, federal charges for wire fraud and racketeering, asset freezing orders to recover the stolen money. But most importantly, we were going to expose everything publicly. Every resident deserved to know they'd been victimized by the woman they'd trusted to protect their community. Veronica thought she was running a sophisticated real estate scam. She was actually building the case that would send her to federal prison, and the entire community was about to find out exactly what their HOA president had been doing with their money. Tom Martinez's law office became our war room. The conference table disappeared under stacks of financial records, property deeds, and evidence files that looked like something from a federal investigation, which, as it turned out, was exactly what this was becoming. "We need to coordinate 3 separate tracks," Tom explained, spreading out a timeline across the polished wood surface. "Criminal charges, civil recovery, and community protection. If we do this right, we can shut down Veronica's operation and recover every stolen dollar." The first call went to District Attorney Sarah Butler, a prosecutor who'd built her career on white-collar crime cases. Tom had worked with her before on HOA fraud. Apparently, corrupt community boards were becoming an epidemic across the state. $430,000 in theft, organized harassment, conspiracy with developers, Tom summarized during their phone conference. Plus federal wire fraud charges for using mail and electronic transfers. This is exactly the kind of case we need to make an example. DA Butler agreed to fast-track the criminal investigation. Within 48 hours, forensic accountants would be examining every HOA transaction going back 5 years. Meanwhile, I was building the Community Response Network. My first stop was the VFW Hall, where my grandfather's old Army buddies still gathered every Thursday night. These guys had seen real combat. They weren't intimidated by suburban legal threats. "Fletcher's grandson needs help with a neighborhood problem," announced Roy Patterson, my grandfather's foxhole buddy from Korea. The room went quiet as I explained Veronica's scheme. By the end of my presentation, 23 veterans had volunteered for security patrols and documentation support. Turns out retired military guys are excellent at gathering intelligence and maintaining surveillance, skills that transfer perfectly to fighting HOA corruption. Dolores emerged as our unofficial community organizer. Her decades as a school principal had taught her how to manage large groups and keep detailed records. More importantly, every neighbor trusted her completely. "I've been documenting Veronica's harassment for months," she explained, opening a filing cabinet that looked like FBI evidence storage. Photos, recordings, copies of threatening letters, financial demands, everything organized by date and victim. The depth of Veronica's systematic abuse was staggering. 47 families had been targeted over 3 years. The average illegal extraction was $3,200 per household. But some elderly residents had paid over $10,000 in fabricated fines and fees. Rick's private investigator cousin provided the technical expertise we needed: professional-grade surveillance equipment, financial tracking software, and most importantly, contacts in law enforcement who specialized in organized fraud cases. "Your HOA president made one crucial mistake," PI Tony Martinez explained, no relation to our lawyer. "She got lazy with digital security. Every fraudulent transaction has an electronic trail, and electronic trails are permanent." The evidence was overwhelming, but we needed a strategy for maximum impact. Random accusations wouldn't work. We needed coordinated exposure that would protect the community and prevent retaliation. Our plan crystallized around 3 key elements: legal action, media exposure, and community mobilization. Tom would file emergency motions to freeze all HOA assets and prevent Veronica from accessing any remaining funds. The goal was to preserve whatever money hadn't already been stolen, then recover the rest through criminal asset forfeiture. I remembered reading about a contractor who'd successfully fought City Hall corruption by documenting everything and building public pressure. The key was creating an unstoppable momentum of evidence and community support that made cover-ups impossible. For media strategy, we contacted Janet Walsh at the local newspaper. No relation to the county commissioner, and definitely not part of Veronica's country club network. Janet specialized in investigative reporting and had won awards for exposing municipal corruption. "This is exactly the kind of story our readers need to hear," Janet said after reviewing our evidence files. "HOA fraud is happening everywhere, but most people don't know how to fight back. Your case could help families across the state." We scheduled a coordinated media blitz, newspaper article, TV news interview, and social media campaign all launching simultaneously. The goal was to create so much public attention that Veronica couldn't intimidate witnesses or destroy evidence. But the most important element was community healing. 47 families had been victimized, isolated, and made to feel powerless. We needed to bring everyone together and show them they weren't alone. Mackenzie came up with the perfect solution: a community veterans memorial garden on the disputed property boundary. Instead of fighting over property lines, we'd create something that honored all local veterans while establishing permanent community ownership of the space. "Grandpa Fletcher would love this," she said, sketching designs that incorporated native plants and memorial stones. "He always said the best